So let's jump in here and see. Let's just start at the top here. I'm taking part in the 60-day novel challenge, but I'm really struggling to come up with a story idea. Any advice? This is when I saw this question this morning, Doug, I kind of laughed because we joke all the time that ideas are the easy part,
Mhm.
except for when they're not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
when you have an idea, it's kind of like when you're looking for a job, you can't find a job, but as soon as you accept an offer, and you're gonna start a job, then you get, 100, offers. "Will you come work for us?"
yeah.
"Well, no, I just took a job," It's kinda one of those things when you don't need a story idea, you're batting them away. I don't have time to write that, and then when you're sitting there thinking about it, well, what can I write about? And then I don't know if you kind of psych yourself out or what, but we touched on this yesterday a little bit. And when we all kind of raced ahead of where we were supposed to be because we were so excited yesterday, and I got into this a little bit. I started talking about how I like to build story around characters, and I know character is next week's show that we're going to talk about, but I was chomping at the bit. Um, Almost always, my story ideas begin with a character, and then I think about what that character wants, and that in and of itself is not a great story idea, because we all are humans and we all want different things, and that is a very basic human thing that nobody wants to read about. But what people do want to read about is a someone that they can relate to, that wants something that they can relate to, and has a roadblock put in the way, and they have to solve a problem to get to what they want. That's where story comes in, is a person you can relate to wants a thing that you can relate to, and there's something standing in their way. And then how do we figure that out? And that's way, way, way oversimplifying story, but that's kind of at the essence what we're dealing with. And then you weave in other characters and other hopes and desires, and all, and story comes out of it. But at the basis, I always begin with a character, and I think about what they want and then what obstacle is in their way, and then I start playing the what if game. And
Mhm.
the what if game is huge for me. What if he wants to marry this girl, but uh, he has a family crisis and his mother has cancer. Well, just, and you just start playing, okay, well, if that happens, then how does this affect his pursuit of the girl? And why, all of his attention is over here. And,
Mhm.
on and on. Or in the case of my book I'm writing, I have a character who is writing his first novel and trying to break into publishing. And he has a limited amount of time, and that's his hope and his desire, and he has a plan for it, and then a dead body shows up, and that derails everything. Then how does he ultimately get to his goal while also helping to solve this thing? And and I start playing the what if game from there, and then I make notes of what if this happens and what if this happens, and then eventually all the what if scenarios wind up in my Dabble plot grid, and then I start laying it out. But that's kind of how I ideate, how I come up with ideas, is character, desire, roadblock, and then go from there. What about you?
Well, before I say mine, I want to emphasize something that you said there. You mentioned
Yeah,
relatable characters and relatable problems. And some people say likable characters.
yeah,
And I think we had a question about this like a month ago or so.
hmm,
When someone says a likable character, they don't mean a character that you adore, right? Or that you
right,
want to be friends with. And when someone says a relatable character, they don't necessarily mean that you've been in the same situation. It just means that something about this character you empathize with. You can see
right,
yourself in that situation, right? So I think that's a big key that people can keep in mind when they're going about brainstorming that way, is not just a problem or a motivation that this character has, but something that actually makes sense to someone outside of that perspective,
right.
right? And
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
tough.
glad you brought that up, because that, if I had one quibble with the save the cat method, is that I feel like they kind of oversimplify the idea of you relating to that character. And I
Hmm.
get what they're saying, have them save a cat and then you automatically bond with them. Well,
Hmm.
sometimes the relatable character is not a likable character. Sometimes
Yes.
I can see myself in a character, or I can see how I could become that character if I'm not careful. and I can relate to that character and I can bond with that character, even though they might be kind of a horrible person.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's
Yeah, and that's how
off
we get
topic.
villains that we love, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they're likable, but you don't like them, right?
Right.
You
You
aren't
don't
gonna go
like
get a
what they
beer with them.
do, but you
Yeah,
understand how they could get there.
yeah,
And I
and
think that's
sometimes
a
you root
big
for them.
draw. I think that's a big draw that we overlook sometimes. Sometimes we connect with a character because we see how we could be them, and
Yeah,
that it kind of scares us a little bit and
yeah,
makes us want to see what happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, for my own, whenever I'm in this pickle and can't think of something to come up with, I like to think about something entirely different in the story that can really like jog my memory. So specifically, if I'm having trouble coming up with the plot idea or a specific instance in the plot, I'll think, okay, what do I want my antagonist to be? What do I want the
Mhm.
villain to look like? And then I'll do a little humming, a little hawing, and then I'll come up with something like I'll have a little brain flash maybe for the antagonist. And okay, this is a unique feature for them. How does that affect my protagonist? Okay, here's a conflict they can have as a result of that one unique feature. Like I mentioned this yesterday. I think of a scene, a very particular scene. I don't know anything else about the characters, but in this scene, specifically, I thought of my protagonist for this future series that will be written one day. The protagonist is like an anti-hero protagonist, and he's holding a gun to somebody who he's robbing, and he just says no heroes. And that's the premise for the entire character, and then I build the world around that, right? That one idea I lock onto. So whether it's a scene, a setting, a character's ability or motivation, like look elsewhere. Don't get so narrowed in on the plot. Look elsewhere, and then you can kind of sculpt around it.
Yeah.
Is what I
Yeah.
like to do.
I like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's really like it's tough because there's no one way to brainstorm something like this.
Yeah.
And you can't control where inspiration comes from. So I wish I could say to whomever asks this, and honestly, there's like 3 or 4 people asking this in the 60-day challenge community because they just can't figure out what exactly they want to write. They either have no idea or they have too many ideas.
Yeah.
So I wish I could give something a little more concrete, but really, you just need to find that one thing you can latch onto, the character and their goal, and then
Yeah.
flesh in the obstacles along the way, or just something else that you could just grab and work around. But look for that, like I guess one anchor would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.